let's talk about 4K. It's been a couple of months since me and Connie bought 4K TV, 4K Blu-ray player, a nice selection, a starter pack of 4K Blu-rays, and I said down the line I'd talk about my experience with 4K Blu-ray. In those 2 months, I've watched 3 4K Blu-rays. I think I own about 15 or 16 of them at this point. As I said, if you haven't seen the previous videos, we had problems with the TV. There's these 3 dots on them, these grey dots, which we still have. You know, we were calling Samsung or Connie was calling Samsung for a couple of months, and they're just like, yeah, don't go to Curry's, just speak to us and we'll sort it out. They didn't sort it out, they didn't sort it out, they didn't sort it out. Finally, they said, talk to Curry's. So we're still waiting for a replacement. It's long overdue. But we're just living with it now, so I just thought, fuck it, let's watch a couple of 4K discs and just see what the fuss is about. And so I thought I'd make a video talking about that. Specifically, I've mentioned it in some of the Blu-ray update videos, and I thought it'd be an interesting journey through 3 films, 3 different 4K experiences. We watched a few films in 4K on the TV through Netflix and Disney+. WALL-E, which was pretty good, and Bad Boys, which looked pretty good. But really, when it comes to 4K movies, I want to see it on disc. Like, if I'm going to watch something that I want to see in the best possible quality, then, you know, stable bitrate on a disc is exactly what I want. I have noticed when I pause a film and I leave it for longer than 10-20 seconds, and then we unpause it, the disc kind of like lags a bit, and the image doesn't move, and then it gets slow, and then it starts again. Don't know if that's my player or if it's just like the power of 4K. I don't know. I did buy a specific 4K Ultra HD HDMI just to see if that would make any difference with the HDR problems. It didn't. But hey, I have a new, an extra HDMI cable. It's no real problem, I suppose. So HDR was an issue, and we'll get into that with this. But just in general, it was difficult to see anything on a 4K disc. Like, I've tested a lot of them, just going through the film and seeing the dark scenes which are unwatchable in HDR. So I turned HDR off. Great, not dark anymore. But it wasn't as simple as that, as we'll get into here. So 3 films I'm going to talk about, and more talking about the 4K experience of them. You'd think, right? Getting a 4K TV, getting a 4K Blu-ray player is a monumental kind of decision for me anyway, and putting all this money into it. Okay, and here's the starter pack. Like, I've got classics like Alien, right? Blade Runner, like new films that are visually dazzling, like Alita Battle Angel, Valerian, The City of a Thousand Planets, classics like Karate Kid and Bridge on the River Kwai. What was the film I went with? The first film to watch in 4K Blu-ray? Of course. How could it be anything else but Godzilla 98? Yeah, that's the one we went with. It got to the point where I was just waiting and waiting for the TV to get replaced, and it wasn't happening. And I bought the big Godzilla Criterion with my birthday money, and I thought, I want to watch like the ones I have seen as well, or buy the ones I have seen, like Godzilla 98, 2014, King of the Monsters, and Shin Godzilla. So I got the 4K of King of the Monsters, and then I saw that this was like £10 on Amazon. I thought, yeah, right. Ordered it, 1-day delivery, it turned up, and we just watched it. So what was it like in 4K? Pretty good. Turned the HDR off. There was no darkness issues, and it's one of those things now where I'm realizing what 4K really is for me as a viewer in my home. It's a premium format, and it gives you the best possible quality, but the jump from Blu-ray to 4K isn't anywhere near as huge as the jump from DVD to Blu-ray. Certainly not as huge as the jump from VHS to DVD. But it is something I notice, and I think I really notice it in close-ups of faces, when you're really seeing the pores and all that kind of stuff, which is stuff that I initially struggled to really see the difference on with Blu-ray in the first place, back in like 2011, 2012, when I first I think it was 2011, when I made the move to high definition and got a Blu-ray player for the first time. But I can tell that there's just an extra added level of resolution, and there's a really good website, I think it's a French website I go on, that has comparisons of a Blu-ray and the corresponding 4K disc, and it has an image with a slider, and you can slide it across, and it's just a really nice, smooth and slick way to see the differences. And sometimes with more modern films, it looks darker and the color's a little bit different, or the color's a little bit deeper. But there are a lot of old films where it's just like, fuzzy, sharp, and all this like extra detail is there, but some of it's so minute that you're not really picking up on it, visually as the image is moving, But for me, knowing that it's there is great. But I think it's going to be a mixed bag moving through any 4K disc, because everything's going to look different based on the film that it was shot on, the way it's been transferred, the way it's been color timed, all that stuff. But Godzilla, I'm going to make a separate video on that, which is becoming like a catchphrase of mine now, but it was really cool to revisit this film. It's the only time I can recall loving a film, revisiting it many years later and going, God, that really isn't good, is it? Ugh, don't think I want to see that again. And then years later going, I kind of want to watch that again, and then watch it and going, that's pretty good. I actually really like that film. Like, I don't know why people shit on it so much. Is it a great Godzilla film? No, but I like it for what it is. And so I'm really glad that I bought this and I own it, and I just really enjoyed revisiting the film. The CGI looked dog shit, and Connie was saying, like, can't they like redo it for the 4K, like just re-render all the original files? And I'm like, well, maybe that's possible, but there's no way they're going to go to that effort, especially not for Godzilla 98. But I read that when this film came out in the cinemas, the CGI wasn't finished, or it wasn't like rendered to the full textures and everything. And when the film came out on DVD or Blu-ray even, they remastered all the CGI. So you're looking at the best it's ever going to look, I think. But the CGI it really doesn't blend well with the live action stuff of the film, which is, for the majority is the whole film. But I enjoyed it a lot, and I'll talk about it in a separate video. And the 4K experience was cool, but my laptop was just exerting some energy and fanning itself, and it really threw me off guard. I'll continue. So yeah, it's not a film I was like, wow, it's so beautiful. Because the thing is, like, it's funny that I'd pick that. It wasn't like I consciously thought this is going to be the first 4K film I watch, but it's a film that the majority of it takes place in New York City. In a grey, rainy atmosphere, so there's not much brightness going on. When they go to the island, there's the big footprint, that looks really great, but yeah, it certainly wasn't like, wow, it wasn't like, The Simpsons when the THX logo comes up and the people's teeth are getting blown out of their faces. It wasn't like that, but it was definitely like, I can see that this is really high quality, Which brings me to the second film that we watched in 4K. Alien. This was a really disappointing experience all round, to the point where I almost thought, like, is Alien really as good as I thought it was? But it is. It's a fucking classic. It's a masterpiece. And it was just distracting. Alien was distracting. I thought, okay, I got the new HDMI cable at this point. Let's try the HDR. And it was unwatchable. Unwatchable. So I turned the HDR off and tried to fiddle around with the settings. People say online, oh, just turn your brightness up to 100 on your TV. Our TV only goes to 50. Now, I don't know if that means that for every increment on our TV, it's equal to 2 increments on a TV that has 100 setting. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough, what's the term? Enough customizability? That's not a word. There's not enough to customize on the TV in terms of settings and stuff, and there'll be things like black levels. Okay, I'll change that. Oh no, that's locked. There's all these locked settings. You got to turn this on, turn that on, and the menu's slow and clunky. It just drives me nuts. But HDR was off. I turned the brightness up, and we could see it. And a lot of it looked pretty good. Some of the model shots in Alien, they really held up. Like, holy shit. And then something I will probably forget at some point, actually. I was going to say I'll never forget it, but I probably will definitely forget it. Was when they first see the ship on the planet, and Connie just went, nice fucking model, which is both a wonderful tribute and quote to Beetlejuice, but she genuinely meant it. It is a nice fucking model, like, it just holds up so well. And so that stuff looked really great. Some of the close-ups looked pretty good as well, but the actual colors were weird, and I started noticing it in people's hair. It was like, it was too dark. I could see part of the texture, but it just seemed washed out, and there was certain clothes that looked washed out and grey. I was trying to fiddle with it, but it's one of those things where it's like, the film has to finish by a certain time before Connie goes to bed, basically. And it's like, we're stressed. I can't stop and fiddle around with the settings anymore. She was getting driven nuts by me trying to fiddle around with the settings. So it was really difficult. And I later read that if you turn HDR off and you're sending the 4K disc to the TV, and it's a 4K disc that has HDR in it, then basically the TV tries to decide the best way to present the film in a high dynamic range, basically almost like upscaling, maybe. I don't know. I might be talking completely out of my ass, but I read something like this, which made a lot of sense, because it seemed like I turned the HDR off and it just didn't know how to fully make the color look alright, because it was just this washed out thing. No matter how much I tinkered with the brightness and contrast, the washed out effect just remained. So that was kind of disappointing, really. And I hope when I watch it again, it'll look better, because I think I've somehow cracked the code, at least temporarily. But at some point, I really just want to get a TV that will let HDR look good. I don't know. It's just one of those things. So the third and final film that we watched just a couple of nights ago was Interstellar. Now, if any film's going to look good in 4K, surely a Christopher Nolan shot on film, IMAX resolution for a big chunk of the movie is going to look good. HDR was on, and I found that there's a setting on the Panasonic player where I can basically adjust the this slipcover is so shiny I can't get the glare out of it, which doesn't really matter, but there you go. There's a brightness setting on the Panasonic player which goes from 0 to 15. Once you get to like 13, 14, the black bars start looking grey, but 10 is like a real sweet spot. The black bars don't look any brighter than they need to be, and it boosts up the it just reveals all this detail that wasn't there when the HDR was on. Well, it's still on, but you're just adjusting the image through the player. And I tweaked it a couple of times throughout the film, but for the most part, it was what it was. It was like, finally, I can just see a film for what it is in HDR and 4K, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it was really the true representation of what that disc can really offer. And I hate the idea that I'm like pumping up the brightness artificially, even though that's not the case, because it's revealing all this detail that is in the image on the disc that is hidden by the HDR. And this is a film set in space, But, I soon settled into it, and I think that the IMAX shots, they looked incredible. When they fill the whole screen, it's just stunning. And the film itself is one of my favorites. It's so great to revisit it. The music is so overwhelming, the performances, and I'm not going to talk about the film too much, but the 4K experience. I found with 4K that what it does is it actually highlights some flaws. Like you'll see when certain shots are not fully in focus. There's like a little bit of the frames a little bit fuzzy. Some of it might be by design, some of it might not, but I think it almost reveals too much. It's almost like, you watch a film on VHS, and you love it, and it's just great and everything, and when you're a kid, and then you watch it on Blu-ray, and it's just like, oh, that's very clearly not Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's like a guy with, with like black hair, so you see all the stunt doubles, you see all the artifice, you see the flaws, and even on films like Seven Samurai, where on the Blu-ray you can very clearly see the joins on the bald caps that a lot of the cast members are wearing, although in that case it's done quite well. You can look at films like the Lone Wolf and Cub series on the Blu-rays of that Criterion set, and you can see like the netting of all of the wigs, and even like the netting on the fake mustaches and stuff. That's where it's been cheaply done, I think, but they reveal almost too much at times. But with Interstellar, it was just, it certainly wasn't like me sitting there like, fucking hell, sound was great, but certain shots, especially like the Gargantua black hole and like just the going past Saturn, anything IMAX that was like fully live action looked stunning. But I think a lot of Nolan's recent films, they tend to look a little bit unimpressive when you go to the normal, widescreen ratio. When it's full IMAX, it's like fucking perfect. And then we go down to like the lesser, aspect ratio, which almost seems less impressive every time. But I mean, I don't know. I got wrapped into it, and I just, for me, of the mountains of 4K discs that I've watched, that is currently 3, Interstellar takes the top spot for sure. because it just didn't have any of the HDR issues, and it felt like it was a film that is designed to be seen in the best possible quality. So I do think that knowing that the detail is there, you know, I mean, some people say, oh, the 4K, you can't really see the difference and all this and that. And yeah, maybe sometimes I don't. Maybe sometimes I'm not sitting there going, wow, this is so much better than the Blu-ray. But I'm such a fucking, like, quality snob. Knowing that it is, you know, undeniably higher resolution comforts me and makes me feel like I'm watching this in the best possible way that I can. But I do see it, especially in close-up images. There's this level of detail there that it really stands out. But I think with older films, you really see the grain, you know? There's a couple of films I've watched or flicked through on Netflix in 4K, and the grain is like really... And that's what makes up the image. So the more grain that you get, the more detail that you're actually seeing. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to touch on with the 4K stuff. Not really. I'm still not diving in like fully to 4K or anything like that. Still looking at things, but not really pulling the trigger. I think more Nolan films would be good. I might check out Dunkirk again. I have that on 4K from like a couple of years ago. So that might be one to go to next. Blade Runner is a big one for me. I'm almost like afraid to watch that in case it's like another repeat of Alien where it's just too dark, but it should be okay. Should be okay. Anyway, so that's pretty much it, I think. So that's been my first foray into the world of 4K Ultra HD discs. Please leave your comments, your thoughts, and your experiences with 4K discs down below. I'd love to hear them. I know a lot of people are really into it. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on it, and a lot of you guys have been very helpful with the comments on my first 4K video, the update video, where you were giving me advice about the HDR and things like that. So anyway, thank you for watching. I think that's it. I feel like there's something else I should be going into that I was planning on discussing. 4K, Ultra HD, high definition. Me stalling for time while I try and think and not have to cut this video. No, I think that's it. Yeah, it's not a quantum leap, but it's a cool like forward step. And it's interesting to see how some of these things look different as well, even down to like the color grading, which is interesting. But I don't love the idea that I'm always going to be checking like what does the transfer look like on Blu-ray, and so that kind of bugs me a little bit. I'd like to just throw it on and watch it and not worry about the settings every single fucking time. So there's that. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Overall, I'd say I'm like mostly a thumbs up on 4K. You know, it feels nice. It's like a premium format. It's priced as such, and I think it's really only for like the most serious of collectors and, you know, people who are really interested in quality and seeing it and everything. And you know, we do have a big enough TV, I think, that it really does show in certain moments, but also I don't want to get caught in that trap of just sitting there thinking about the way that it looks all the time. Obviously, the way a film looks is, you know, critical to how you enjoy it in terms of, you know, just the way it looks. But I mean, I shouldn't be thinking about the quality. I shouldn't be thinking about, is that, you know, is that as sharp as it could, you know, it just, feel like you lose yourself a little bit when you get bogged down in too much of that technical stuff and you're not being engaged in the emotion of the film. And in a film like Interstellar, emotion is the driving factor. And just one last little story to end this thing on. The scene at the beginning when they're driving through the cornfield chasing the Indian drone and the music starts up. Connie just went, I'm so happy we're watching this. And she later told me when we'd finished watching the film that she almost started crying at that moment just because she was so excited to be watching the film again when the score started up. So that was nice. And it's a great film. One last thing. I knew it. Sometimes our TV flickers. It's clearly a defective fucking TV. And it started flickering in the last 2 minutes of Interstellar. So it's like the build-up and Ellen Burstyn's monologue, you know, she's on a new world by the light of a new sun. The music is swelling and everything. And it's just like this little flicker. And I'm like, oh, I want to just stop it and reset the TV, but it's going to ruin the moment so much. So that kind of bugged me. Connie didn't notice until the credits were rolling and the white is like, the white of the text is like, you know, flickering. Anyway, hopefully we get that TV replaced soon. And I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause